All right, so welcome everybody to our very first ever online Sydney IANDS gathering. And we're just rolling with the nature of the world today. It's worked out very conveniently. And because our speaker, Kirsty, is calling in from Auckland, and we had already planned to be on Zoom. So you know what? We were ahead of the times. Things were just
totally
scheduled in synchronistically. And so here we are. It's so great that we can have this format. So Kirsty Salisbury is a speaker, is a coach, is a celebrant. Is that right as well?
Yep, I am. I do a lot of different things, put it that way.
So she is a mixed bundle bag of wonderfulness over there in New Zealand. And one of the coolest things that, of course, aside from having a near-death experience, which, you know, Kirsty will go into her own introduction and story about all of that. But because of the near-death experience, part of what Kirsty is involved with over there, aside from starting the IANDS group too, New Zealand's first ever IANDS group in Auckland, is also a podcast, an NDE podcast. And so Kirsty's interviewed them, just ordinary folks who have had near-death experiences, as well as some of the very big names in the field, and just such a broad variety of people. And so I'm really excited that we could have Kirsty come, and thank you, Kirsty, for being
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Because not only do we get to hear your story, which is, of course, what our community loves. We always love a good experience, a story, and the opportunity to have some Q&A. But also you bring with you the experience of having spoken with so many others and the gems that you're able to distill from that. And I'm sure the folks in the group are going to have some questions today about maybe some of the more interesting things, or the never before heard things, or some pretty bizarre things, some things that you've come across and encountered in your roles that, you know, you've got a broader perspective on that. So so I guess we'll jump into all of that, but I'm going to hand the talking stick over to you and just say welcome and thank you for being here. And our format again for everyone today, Kirsty's going to share with us for a bit of time. And once that's done, we'll stop the recording and then we can have an open Q&A.
Fantastic. So thank you very much, Nicole, for having me here. I am so excited. I know there's a lot of stuff going on in the world at the moment, a lot of uncertainty, but the fact that we can all be here together today gets me very excited. And I'm really looking forward to sharing my story. So if I'm honest, my story doesn't come out of me very easily yet. I know when we were talking about our closet stories, and this one sat inside of me for 27 years. It wasn't something that I talked about very easily at all because it was so profound and impacted me so much. So I'm a little nervous to be here, if I'm completely honest, but on the same page, I'm so excited because I believe that my story is helping people, and that the general awareness of these amazing spiritual experiences is helping people all over the globe. And really, I think this is just the beginning. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Bear with me a second as I make sure that this is all working good. Here we are. Okay. So this is me, slightly different here, but this is my journey. And people always say, when did your journey start? And I always come back to, well, I was really, really young. So I grew up in a normal household. I had a normal childhood. I didn't have any set beliefs about very much at all. And I had an understanding about God, and I believed in God, but I didn't have any set beliefs. And I came from a family that really didn't enforce much of that. So I was just going about my normal day. Life was just how it would be. So I was 11 years old at the time. I then had my 12th birthday, and I had a 12th birthday party, which I actually can't remember, but that's okay. And then I was a gymnast as well. I spent all of my life doing gymnastics. So it was the absolute core of everything to me, right down to the food I ate. And all I cared about was training and spending time with my gym friends. And I started to set some goals. I'm a bit of an all or nothing person. I started to set some goals, and I decided that I wanted to go to the Olympics. which is pretty out there. But nevertheless, I just carried on doing my training and I started to do quite well. And so I've just turned 12, and this is me just after my 12th birthday. And I just qualified to go down to the national champs. And I knew that if I went national, then I could go international, and that's where my dream could really start to happen. So I was training really, really hard. And at the school that I was in, we had a school with bars in the playground. You know, you had the jungle gym frame where people, you know, you'd swing. I think most of you are pretty familiar with the jungle gym bars at a school when you're 10 years old, 11 years old. And then they had these single bars in the playground as well. And I remember swinging on the bars and thinking, I've got to practice more. I've got to get this perfect. And I had rips all over my hands. I was just training. Everything was about training. I did some type of maneuver and I hit my head. And I remember thinking, oh, that really hurt. But I didn't think too much more of it. And I carried about my day and I went off to class thinking, oh, my head hurts. And it's funny how I can remember that, but I can't remember my birthday party, which was just a couple of weeks beforehand. And anyway, I went home and I didn't think much about it at all. The pain subsided and I thought it's just a bit of a knock to the head. What we don't know is whether that was going to be the beginning of everything for me going forward. So within 48 hours, I noticed that I'd had a headache. So going from being a very, very active gymnast, I then lived a life which I remember coming home and being extremely tired. I'd come home from training and all I wanted to do was go to sleep. And I thought, I'm so tired, but I had the championships that weekend. So this is a Wednesday night and I've got the champs on the Saturday morning. So I'm thinking I've got to train more, I've got to do more, but I just was so tired. So I ended up going off to bed. And then what happened when I was in bed was I woke up in the middle of the night and I had this headache and it was just pinpointed right on the side of my head here. And I remember thinking, this is the weirdest headache, but it was so overwhelming that I just could not handle the pain. And so I tried to call out to my family, tried to call out to my mum saying something was wrong. I felt really sick. I wasn't really sure what was going on, but all I was aware of was I had to get out of bed to go to the bathroom and that my head hurt. And so I tried to get out of bed, and as I got out of bed, I fell onto the floor. So then I was a heap on the floor, and I remember my body doesn't work, and I had the headache, and everything was just not making sense. And my mother had heard the noise of me falling onto the floor and then me trying. I was trying really hard to get out of bed, to get back up into bed, and I couldn't get into bed. And my mother had heard me. She came down the and she sort of thought, what are you doing down there? But realized that something was wrong. And I can remember her picking me up and carrying me into the spare room. So as she was carrying me into the spare room, I'd had a stroke, basically. My body wasn't working. I had this headache. I felt really, really sick. And she put me into the spare room bed, which was a big double bed, and she decided that she would lie down next to me and look after me for the evening. So we got into the bed. She got me there. She got into bed, just being so incredibly sleepy, so sleepy that I just couldn't handle it. And I was about to go to sleep, and then this voice came and said to me, do not go to sleep. So I'm thinking, what is this voice? Who is this voice? I didn't recognize the voice. I didn't know anything except for I was tired, my work, and I felt really sick, and I had this headache. And I couldn't hold on for very long. The voice kept repeating, don't go to sleep. It's really important you don't go to sleep. And of course, I fell asleep. And I don't remember anything else for some time. I just remember that the next thing was I was in pitch black, absolute darkness. And as I was in this darkness, I was thinking, this is really strange. And I could hear my dad's voice. My dad was alive at the time, which again is a very interesting characteristic of an NDE because most people experience people who have passed. But my dad was there, but I couldn't see him. And it was like he was up behind me, just slightly to my right, slightly behind me to the side. And he was saying, okay, you need to squeeze my hand. And I was thinking, what is this? This is so strange. squeeze his hand. It was such a weird thing. And I was still trying to work out where I was. And he was saying, you've got to squeeze my hand. And I could hear him getting desperate. And so I thought, okay, I'll squeeze his hand, because I felt fine. I felt great. I was full of confusion. I didn't know where I was or what was going on. But I thought, okay, I'll squeeze his hand so he's not worried, and then we can carry on with whatever we need to do. And I went to try and squeeze his hand, and I realized that I couldn't squeeze his hand. And it was because I didn't necessarily have a body. But I didn't realize that I didn't have a body. I was just me in this pure darkness. It was like there was just nothingness. So people talk about the void in their death experiences. I believe that I was in that void. There was absolutely no emotion there except for me with my confusion. So I wasn't scared, I wasn't afraid, I wasn't happy, I wasn't excited. I pretty much just was. It was just, it was. And my dad squeezed my hand, and I can't connect it. I can't even put this into, which is something you'll hear quite a lot as well. I can't connect my body to what's going on. I can't find his hand to squeeze. And I can't, you know, I don't think I had a body, which is why I find his, and I can't see him. So I'm kind of fumbling around trying to do this. And as I'm doing this, I get more and more panicky. And he's starting to say, you have to squeeze my hand. And so I'm thinking, okay. And it was like, this sounds very, very big-headed, but it was like there was some weight of the world, some enormous responsibility, that if I didn't squeeze his hand, then things wouldn't be the same ever again, that I had to do this. So again, sounding very big-headed, I decided, okay, I'll give this everything I've got, even if I need to die for this, because I didn't have any concept that potentially I was dead or I was out of my body. All I knew was I was in this place. I didn't even recognize or connect to the fact that I'd had the headache, that I wasn't well, I'd had the voice. I was just in this place of darkness. So I mustered up everything I had, absolutely everything, to squeeze his hand. And I thought, okay. And I remember talking myself through it, kind of, you know, when you give yourself a bit of a pep talk and you say, okay, we're going to do this. Big, deep breath in. And I went to squeeze his. It meant that I would kill myself doing it. And so I did. I braced myself and I went to squeeze, and it was almost like I put and then suddenly I was aware of fingers, and these fingers just did a little twitch in them. And as they did this, there was this booming silent, which blows my mind as well, white light. I was in the most magnificent place. So we hear about the white light, we hear about the brightness. It was this place where I was just surrounded by love, surrounded by welcoming feelings. And I knew that these feelings were there for me. And I knew that it was about me. It wasn't about the fact that his hand. I kind of was wondering where the darkness had gone, but I was so in this beautiful light with people singing, and there was music. There was just this most amazing, welcoming feeling, and I felt so incredibly loved. And then I noticed that all around me were beings, and I felt like, almost like I was just reclining. I can't explain it. I wasn't too aware of my body, but I felt like I was reclining and there were these people around me. So I tried to look at the beings and I tried to identify who they were, because I was very curious. I still had the confusion, but it had definitely reduced down. And I'm looking at these, probably about 7 or 8 of them that were directly around me. And they were there, and they were there to welcome me, but they had no facial recognition. Like, I couldn't see any. They were silhouettes, but they were like 3D silhouettes. And so it was a really, really interesting time. And I was just looking at them trying out. And I remember thinking, this is just glorious. This is amazing. And then literally just like that, I woke up. And so I don't remember ever waking up in my body. So I don't remember returning back to my body. I just woke up. And then quite some time, I really questioned what had happened, what was going on. So we had this whole time here. I've jumped forward a little bit here, but basically I had a brain hemorrhage. So I had a brain bleed. My brain had exploded. So we don't know whether when I hit the bars, it had just jigged something, but basically I had an AVM on my brain, which is an arterial venous malformation. And it means that basically before I was born that my brain hadn't formed correctly. So just like someone's born with maybe a malformed or a foot or one part of the body, but when they're born, you can generally see that. Whereas for me, because it was in my head and my brain, you couldn't see it. And so we didn't know whether this was something that would have happened if I hadn't have hit my head. We don't know whether I could have got through life and had no problems at all. But basically, the blood pressure built up. They couldn't, the blood pressure built, so the blood couldn't flow through all the vessels. And then it built up the pressure, the brain burst, and I had the brain bleed. So they rushed me into hospital, and I was oblivious to all of this because I was in a very deep coma. So when I fell asleep in the bed with the voice telling me not to fall asleep, that is pretty much when I believe that my coma started, because my parents came into my room the next day trying to wake me up. So my mum had slept the night with me. She couldn't wake me up, and she thought, well, she's been training really, really hard. It's probably time for her to have a bit of a sleep in. She had the headache in the night. She wasn't feeling well. She was vomiting. I'll just let her sleep, which is a natural reaction. I have no ill feelings towards my mother, but in her allowing me to sleep meant that I was going deeper and deeper into a coma, and I was bleeding more and more on the brain. You'd have no way to know. So they called the ambulance. They called the doctor. The doctor came around. He did some tests, and then he called the ambulance and he said, we've got to get there. Apparently it was literally minutes, down to the minutes, where if they hadn't have operated there and then, very, very high chance that they would lose me. So they, on the operating table is when they did actually lose me. So it's in my more than just this, but this, I felt so justified. I only found these notes because, like I said, I buried this for 27 years. So I only started to look up my notes about 3 or 4 years ago, when I started to come to the realization that this is something that I needed to bring to the surface, that I could no longer let this control me and hide my life around my story. It was a very, very emotional thing, very emotional journey. So when I found this, and I did need resuscitation, I did need ventilation, that they had lost me twice on the operating table, I felt like, wow, this actually happened, which is really crazy because my experience was so real, but I just shut it down within me. They lost me on the operating table. They had to bring me back, and then they aborted my brain surgery. So I was having brain surgery to remove this little AVM, which was on my brain. And then they put clips in, and they were trying to get it all sorted, but they lost me. So they brought me back. They then lost me again, so they brought me back again. And then they said at that point, we actually need to abort this surgery completely. We cannot continue because she would definitely die on the operating table. We won't get her back. So they brought me back, and then that's when I woke up. So I woke up in the critical care unit. I just had this most beautiful experience of the white light and the people, and I was just feeling so, so great about life. But here I was, and I had had brain surgery, and this is a couple of weeks into my rehabilitation, this photo here. I knew that everything was perfect. So you wouldn't look at me and go, wow, everything's perfect in her life, because I was completely paralyzed down one side of my body. I had this big surgical scar I had tubes everywhere. I couldn't do anything for myself. So I was completely everything lying in the critical care ward. And they didn't really know whether I'd make it. They didn't really expect much for me. And I woke up going, life is great. Life is beautiful. This is amazing. I kind of wanted to go back to that beautiful place where there was the white light and the angels, I believe they were, the welcome party. But I knew that this was my course, and I was totally okay with everything. I also had, I guess, some knowledge. I knew everything that had happened to me, and I knew that I'd had the surgery. I knew that I'd had this thing, but it had been part of my life plan. And so I wasn't bothered by it, but I also could see different things. So I was lying in the hospital bed. I had about what had happened. I had knowledge about which tubes and things I needed and didn't need. I knew for absolute fact that I would be okay and that my journey wasn't going to be simple, but I knew that I was out of the red. You know, I would be okay. Everything was exactly how it needed to be. And also see different things happening. So I could see my parents who were at home. I could see them getting in the car to come and visit me. But I was lying in a hospital bed 40 minutes away. And at that point, the nurse came in, one of the nurses, and she said, I've just spoken to your parents. They're getting in the car, they're coming, and you telling me this? Do you think I'm stupid? Of course they do. Of course they are. I can see them just as well as I could see you coming to tell me. And then a nurse came in to tell me. She started to try and explain to me how I'd been started to tell the story. And I was thinking, these people think I'm an idiot. These people just think I'm so stupid because they're telling me the obvious. And so then I started to ask to remove tubes. And they were saying, no, you need to keep that in. And I'm thinking, I don't need to keep that in. I know that that one's needed. I know that that one's not needed. I know my parents are now on the motorway on their way to see them. I know that next nurse is about to come in and tell me something, which I already know the answer to. And to me, I didn't even question why. It just seems so completely normal to me. I would know the answer to these questions. It was so normal to me that I'm in two places at the same time. It was so normal that I had this knowledge, and yet there was no way I could have known it. So it was quite a beautiful experience. And then the fun really started, because from here, because I still had the AVM on my brain. When they went in, they found other AVMs. They found other potential bleeds that were waiting to happen, and they did them out. So I'd woken up in hospital and they thought, well, she's probably brain damaged. She probably won't walk again. She probably won't talk properly. She probably doesn't have much future for her. So they were really surprised when they would come in and they would try and ask questions and they would test my memory, things like that. And I would say, I'm absolutely fine. I'm good to go. I'm okay. And my body didn't work and my brain was a bit muddled. But what they realized was that I was what we called a walking time bomb. So somewhere in my notes, it says something about that, because this could all happen again. So I've been through this bit of journey, but now I had to go for a very physical journey. And there really was no knowing that it wouldn't happen again. So they're talking to a gymnast who is a competitive gymnast, and they were saying things like, you can't do anything to raise your blood pressure. You can't do anything to raise your heartbeat. So I wasn't allowed to do anything to get myself excited, which is really, because I was a very happy, very positive person. And you just say the word chocolate and my heart rate's going to skyrocket because I'm so excited. I'm still a little bit the same, if I'm fair. And they said, look, we don't know if you'll ever walk again. We don't know what your future will be. You're probably going to need 24-hour care for months and months. You're not going to finish school. You're not going to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to do that. And they really focused in on all of the things that I wouldn't be able to do, I couldn't do, I might not do. And yet I knew that I had a very big future ahead of me. And I knew that I had great plans for my life, because this was all part of my life plan. So people always ask me, well, what is it? What's your purpose? What's your mission? What is this great thing that you came back with? Because I talk about how I came back with a download. I still no, I still don't understand. But what I do know is that I need to be connected to that place, and I need to make sure that I live my life in accordance with what I believe I'm meant to be doing daily. So they're telling me all these things, how I might die again, how they can't operate because I would definitely die on the operating table. Thinking we need to just prove them all wrong. So obviously you can tell now I can talk. I can talk quite a lot if you ask my husband. I can walk, so I learned how to walk. I made this decision that I would try and do one little thing every single day. And so I can remember he used to come into the hospital every day. And the obvious thing when he came in was I said to him, were you there beside my bed when I was in a coma? Were you there saying, you need to squeeze my hand and let me know you're going to be okay? Because that's what I put it down to. I figured that it was there when I was in the coma. I couldn't make sense of the timing because that happened before I experienced the black place, before I experienced the light, before I experienced the angels, the welcome party. So I was thinking, how could he have done that before my surgery? Because it was definitely in the surgery that I died. So that made sense to me. So I did ask him, and she couldn't talk about it. So I asked my mum, was Dad there when the surgery happened? Was Dad there pleading with me to squeeze his hand? He said no, that he actually sat outside. He couldn't even go into the room when I was in critical care. He couldn't even go in because it was just too much for him. It was just too difficult for him to face. And so that made me really curious. But he would come in. I was always wondering, how does that happen? How do I have this amazing connection with my dad? And it's remained. My dad has now died. He's passed away. And so I still have a amazing connection with him, which is a whole nother story. But he would come in every day to visit me. And I said to him one day, this isn't the life. I can't live the life that people expect me to. I can't live the life that the doctors are saying. Now, there probably was an element of they had to be very careful what they said. They couldn't promise too much. They're probably worried about the legal side of things. If I turned around and said, well, you said this or you said that. So I think the standard response from what I've learned is that they underestimate, they downplay what you're capable of. And for me, I very much felt like that was what was happening. And so they were telling me all these things. I thought, no, that's not right. My dad would come in and visit me, and I said to him, will you be the one who helps me get through this? This isn't the life I need. This isn't the life I've been promised from somewhere else, you know, my beliefs where I had a great calling for my life. And every day that he came in, I would show him one new thing. And it sounds like such a ridiculous thing, but in that I learned just how significant the tiniest changes were. So for me, things like twitching a finger led to opening and closing a hand. And there was all of these little steps that happened, whether it was being able to smile 1 millimeter more on my left side of my face, which was drooping down, and I was dribbling like a newborn, and it was pretty ugly, to be fair. To take one micro step every day to get back on my feet and to become the person that I needed to be for the calling that I had on my life. That was really great. We knew that I needed surgery or else I was going to be this time bomb forever. So what happened is they ended up saying I needed to go over to the UK. I needed to have what we called back then stereotactic radiotherapy. And so this is a fancy little head frame that I had to wear. I had to get on a plane and fly to the other side of the world when we had no clue whether I would survive the takeoff because of the pressure, because I was a walking time bomb with AVMs in my brain and I'd had surgery. It wasn't too fresh. I didn't get to the UK till I was it was over a year. I had to wait for the surgery because they actually just didn't know what to do with me. They knew that they couldn't operate again, but they didn't know what the other options were. So there was a really big waiting game until this happened. And this was a very, very early stages of this. They now have this. This is quite a common treatment for not so much cancer, but for growths and for tumors and different things that people have in their brain. Now you have a gamma knife surgery, which is a lot more popular, not more common. This is back in the dark ages. They gave me two options. Either we could attach it to my teeth, or we could attach it through bolts through my neck. And I chose the teeth option, obviously. It was really back in the dark ages in terms of surgery. My current doctor cannot believe these photos. He just thinks it's almost barbaric how far back they go. So I flew over to the UK. I could hobble along by this stage. I could walk a little bit. I couldn't walk for long, but I was probably not the easiest patient. So I refused medication. In my notes, it talks about how I felt at will to discharge myself from my medication. I refused a wheelchair. I refused crutches because I thought if I'm going to get better, I need to do this hard and fast. I can't take it at the pace that the professionals want me to. I'm quite determined in a lot of things, but whether that was a good thing or not, I don't know. So I was hobbling around at this stage. We flew over. My mother took me over to the UK. It took 2 months to go through the surgery process. So I had to start off having some tests and different things, got the head frame fitted. They then put me into this frame in the middle here. This is the stereotactic radiation machine. This basically fired a whole lot of laser beams at my brain all at once to try and fry the AVMs. And the idea was that they would all dissolve and then come out through my bloodstream. And they really didn't know whether this was an option. They didn't know what to do with me. But after 2 months, I had the surgery, just going back over regular intervals, having it. And then this last picture was the final test to see whether it had worked. And so they're sticking a tube into my brain, which goes up to my brain, an angiogram, to see what things look like in my brain at this point. And then we got the all clear that they'd done as much as they could so that I could go home. So we went back home and I was just thinking, what is this? This is just so strange. I've had this amazing experience. I believe without a doubt that I have a call on my life. I believe I have some purpose, but I don't know what it is. And I feel so connected to a God that I don't necessarily believe in. And I really just didn't know how to put all the pieces together. And we have to remember at this stage, I was only 12 years old, so I didn't have any set beliefs. I didn't have any worldview. I just had me as a child, pretty dependent on my parents, had a very interesting teenage years. I kind of missed my teenage years by going through this surgery, by walk and talk. Socially, it was very, very interesting. And so what came out is I became a bit of an introvert. So I am an introvert. Everybody's going into isolation at the moment, and I'm thinking, well, my life's pretty much just isolation anyway. So I became an introvert, and I did what I had to do to get through. And then I started to feel the weight of everything I'd been through. I started to feel the shame and the heaviness, and that I was a burden on my family. I felt really terrible that I'd separated my parents for 2 months to go to England for surgery. I felt terrible that I was a financial burden. I felt terrible that I needed people and that I couldn't do things on my own. And all of this put me into a place where I went into shutdown, really. And I spent years and years in this place of feeling like I couldn't accept who I was. I couldn't accept me. I felt like I couldn't ever ask anything of anyone because that would be a burden, which I'd already used up my burden amounts, my burden allowance in this lifetime, which sounds quite ridiculous, but it's genuinely how I felt. So for 27 years, I didn't talk about this. For 27 years, I just on pretending I was like everybody else, but actually just keeping at home a little bit, keeping myself a little bit distant from everybody and not really allowing myself to be all that connected. And yet still hanging on to this experience that I'd had. I didn't know what a near-death experience was. I'd never heard of NDE, nothing like that. And then I was probably about 18, and I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but there's a guy in New Zealand, his name's Ian McCormick, and death experience. He got stung by box jellyfish when he was surfing, I want to say off the coast of India, but that's possibly not right. I do forget details like that. Anyway, he had been stung by box jellyfish and he had had a near-death experience. It's actually quite a phenomenal one. And so I remember hearing about the story and thinking, that's really familiar. I had something like that. Maybe that was real. Even though, like I said, I felt like it was very, very real, but I had no proof. So he had this experience where he had a near-death experience. And then I started to think, maybe I had a near-death experience. And so I kept researching a little bit, and I kept on just having it going in the background, just simmering in the background, this whole concept of a near-death experience. And thinking, well, I had one of those, but I don't know what to do with it. That was just something that happened, and I can stay in my life with shame and I can move on. And that was fine until about 5 years ago now. Years ago, I'd gone through my life. I'd met an amazing guy who is now my husband, and he pretty much challenged me on a lot of my beliefs, because I believed without a doubt that I was unlovable, that nobody would stick around with me, nobody would take the risk, because yes, I've got the all clear on my surgery and I can walk and talk and I can do everything. You would never even know. Most people don't even know my story, which is pretty cool. He taught me that I was lovable, that somebody would stick with me, that somebody would take the risk, and that it was okay to be exactly who I needed to be. And so I've got a lot of gratitude for him. And he just went through this journey with me. And there came a time when I said to him, I feel like I need to tell the world about what had happened, because obviously I shared it with him. And he said, oh, okay, that's fine. Go and tell the world. That's great. I'd been hiding from my journey so much that when they said you probably won't walk, and I do walk with a tiny little limp, I thought, right, I need to become the fastest, fittest, strongest person I know. So I became a personal trainer. Blew myself out in the water when I got my certificate as a personal trainer. Most dedicated to going to the gym, to doing exercise, to running, to walking, to doing everything I could to become everything that nobody would ever suspect that there was anything wrong with me. And in doing stuff in this little jail, actually it was quite an enormous jail all around me, where I constantly had to prove that and if there was any weakness in my life, I had to overachieve to come through that. So I'm really telling you the full-blown story here. I'm actually quite surprised. So I went through this, and I said to my husband, I really need to talk about this. I'd gathered quite a following with being a wellness coach, which is ironic for somebody who had been so sick. I was now a wellness coach, a personal trainer. I was obsessed with healthy living and being as fast and strong as I could be. And so I went to go and tell my audience that, hey, by the way, you don't know about me. I used to be paralyzed and I needed a wheelchair at times to be able to get to do things. Plus I had an amazing experience, and it couldn't come out. I couldn't tell the world what had happened. I couldn't even tell my closest people. And so I didn't tell them. I held on to it. And then I said to him about a year later, it's about time that I went and talked about this experience. And he's thinking, oh, okay, here we go. I went and tried again and I couldn't do it. And I tried again and again. And it took me 3 years before I could come out and tell my story. So I've been sharing my story now for 4 years. And it has absolutely blown me away, just the response that has come from that. So you've heard a lot about my physical journey, but my spiritual journey has been very, very interesting as well. So when I came out of hospital and I was well enough to hobble along, and actually the very first time I left the house, I went straight to a church. And I can remember standing in the driveway of this church, in the car park driveway area, totally terrified by everything that was going on. I didn't have any beliefs. I didn't know what was going on. But I can remember standing there and just putting my hands up and saying, I don't know who you are. I don't know what happened there. I promise that my life I'll live for you and the greater purpose to help as many people as I can. And I don't even know what that means. And it felt very releasing, but very overwhelming. So I stood there in the car park, and then I decided that I could go into the church. I went into the church, and it was a youth group, because I was about 13 and a half at this stage. So I went into the youth group and I became a part of the youth group, and I started going along to church, and I started to have an amazing spiritual journey, which lasted years and years and years. And the spiritual journey has definitely still lasted. However, I've realized that my journey can no longer fit into a church. And so my beliefs have changed slightly over the years, but I still have this most amazing spiritual connection. And then just while I think that I'm living life and I've got my beautiful daughter, I'm driving my car and I'm out in the back roads. Like I say, I live in the middle of nowhere. I'm out in the back roads and I'm driving my car and I have the voice come, and the voice comes down and it just speaks to me. I want you to go and share near-death experiences. And this is after I've admitted that I had one. That's pretty much all I'd done. I hadn't talked openly. I'm now a public speaker. I hadn't even shared that on the stage like that. I talked a little bit about my illness, but I had not mentioned my spiritual side of things. And so I'm and I get this voice and I'm thinking, what the heck? What? No way. No, don't do it. The voice comes again, slightly more determined this time. It's not an audible voice. I know this voice. It's the same voice that I talked with when I stood in that church car park. I know it's the same voice that's connected to this light. It's like a voice of knowing. It's audible within me, but I can't physically hear it, but I cannot deny it. So it came back slightly stronger going, I want you to go and share near-death experiences with the world. And I thought, oh no. Okay, here's what I'm very quickly thinking on my feet, thinking, how do I get out of this? I can't do this. How can I possibly avoid doing this? So I know one lady who lives in the UK, one lady who has had a near-death experience. And so if I go to her and I send her a survey with maybe 5 questions on it, then I can see that somewhere in the world, then I've done what the voice wants me to do. So, oh, that's a bit sneaky, but that's quite good actually. And then the voice comes back again. And I've only driven about 400 meters in this time because it all just came so quickly with me fighting back. You know, when you're in a heated argument, it's quite fast the way you can communicate back and forth. And it said, no, I want video interviews. I want spoken interviews. And I thought, what the heck? I don't even know how to do this. So I thought, okay, I can deny this and I can put this on hold and I can wait 27 years and then realize that I need to do it anyway, or I can just get on with this. So this terrifies me. So if it terrifies me, I'm going to do it because I actually believe that fear is a really great thing to pursue. And I come back to my journey when I was learning how to walk and talk and going through flying in aeroplanes, which we thought might kill me. We just didn't know. I will go and post a thing in a Facebook group. I dabbled in Facebook groups about near-death experiences because, like I said, I wanted to understand what I'd had. I knew that I'd had one at this stage, and I knew that other people out there that had had them, but I didn't feel a need to talk about it. I just wanted to be in the back row observing and looking at these posts. So I'll go home and I'll put a post up in a Facebook group. And if I put a post up, nobody's going to come back to me and say, yes, they want to deal with me. So then really I've kind of done the thing. I can go back to that one lady in the UK and I can talk to her. So I went home and within about 25 minutes, I had 7 responses from people saying, I'll happily share my story with you. I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? This is really overwhelming. But I had to go through with it because I had the voice and now I put it out there and these people would think I was completely crazy if I didn't actually interview them, if I changed my mind. So I did it. I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. And I interviewed one person who said, I know somebody else who would love to share their story with you. And then I interviewed my second person. They said, I know somebody else who would love to share their story with you. And it kind of just started to grow. And this thing grew legs. And I thought, I'm just going to do a couple and then I can stop because I still didn't feel the need to share this. I didn't feel that I needed to talk about my own experience. But this thing was growing legs. I was thinking the voices told me, okay. And I really felt prompted to keep going. So I kept going. And now I have a fully fledged podcast with interviews of near-death experiences from all over the globe. And it's just the most beautiful thing. It's the favorite part of my work. It's the favorite part of my day to hear these stories. And then I get these emails which come in and they tell me how these interviews are changing their perspective on death. Or they listened to it and then they didn't commit suicide because they believed that they had a higher purpose, or there was something going on, or their family interactions changed, or, you know, I get the most amazing conversations and emails and people opening up to me about things which I love. And it's at the point now where I think, who am I to say no to that? That is actually changed in words. So I just go with the voice. The voice still talks to me, still gives me some guidance and direction. But now I have this podcast, which I absolutely love. And still I haven't shared my own experience. So then my listeners are starting to write to me and say, this is all good and well, but what about you? Haven't you had an experience? And I thought, right, archive that email. And then I get a message, we want to hear your experience. It's coming, archive that message. And I was literally just shutting down every opportunity to do it. And then I felt so much fear to share my own experience that I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do this. And so I decided to do that this year. I decided that my first episode this year would be my own story. I put it out there. And then again, the emails started coming in saying that has helped me so much. That has really changed my perspective on life and living, or that's connected me back to source, or I went to church because I heard your message. You know, there's all these different angles on it. And I just feel like there's so many good things that come out of these interviews and so many parallels. It's amazing to hear the common themes that come out of the podcast, and yeah, how these experiences are so life-altering. Since then, I've had a few spiritual experiences, nothing super, super transformational, but just enough to keep me tapping into what's happened and tapping into what I believe is my life path and where I need to be going, what I need to be doing. I have a beautiful connection with my father who, like I say, he did die. I believe that he's probably one of my, actually, I don't put a name on it because I'm not somebody who puts a lot of names on things. Just like I say, I don't quite fit into the church. People ask me what my belief system is, what denomination I am. It's all too big for that. I can't put labels on anything, but I believe that my dad's here to help me and to guide me, and that we have a very strong spiritual connection. And it is just the most beautiful thing. So I have talked non-stop. That's pretty much my started very early on. At 12 years old, I had my experience. I saw the light. I knew that I had a call for my life. I'm still not 100% sure, but I know if I tap into that same energy, that beautiful place where I went to see the white light, the angels, the music, connection with my dad, I know that I can't be going too wrong and other people's lives are being changed. So thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me share. Feel free to check out the podcast. Okay.
Kirsty, thank you so much for that. I know people are going to have parts, they might have questions, they might have bits they want to share and reflect back. And what a rich experience you've been able to share with us. You know, it's always so interesting to hear accounts of children.
Yeah.
Too, because as you say, at that point in time, a worldview hasn't really been strength, you know, it's not that strong at that point, and so it becomes part of the foundation. And as you and I have talked about before, we share many similarities in our own experience there about a living person being part of it, and also having them as children. So fascinating pieces, your relationship with your father, the great void, and then the light. And thank you so much too. What I really appreciate about your story is the struggle, the very real struggle after the experience. And what can happen so often when we talk about near-death experiences and we hear these accounts is people can get really caught up in just the experience themselves, and perhaps how either beautiful or wild the experience was, or just different, you know, out of this world, literally, or mind-blowing. But what we don't talk about enough are all of the challenges that can occur as a human integrating the beyond human components. And really, I think that's what draws so many people to our community, our discussions, the IANDS group, these conversations, because we understand, we get it, that struggle is real.
Yeah, I totally relate with that too, because people say to me, I wish I could have a near-death experience. And I think, oh, are you sure about that? But it is the greatest gift I've ever received. It is the most beautiful thing. Love my journey. I wouldn't change it. I love the struggle because I've learned so much. And yeah, it's just been beautiful. But 27 years I've not even been able to acknowledge it. I mean, there was a lot that went there. Definitely hid in my hole, became quite in myself, and yeah, but it's a beautiful experience. We can't undeny that. So
yeah, now that you're out of the
yeah.
box, wow.
Yeah, I know.
You're
I'm having a great time now.
That's right. That's right.
Exactly.
Watch out, world. All right, so I'm going to end the recording here. Thank you for those who have joined the watching of the recording later on, the playback, and we look forward to welcoming you in one of our future Zooms. And hopefully if you're in Sydney, in person as well. But stay connected to our community. Please do sign up to the newsletter so you get our updates. And once again, Kirsty, thank you.
Thank you.
Good. So I'm going to stop the recording.